Welcome back to the deep dive. So if you've ever walked into a space, I don't know, maybe a hospital waiting room or an airport terminal,
hmm
and immediately felt your shoulders tense up,
Oh, absolutely.
you know just how powerful architecture can be. But today, we're looking at the flip side of that. We're talking about how really intentional, thoughtful design can completely change your experience.
Right. How it can make even the most, mundane public spaces feel genuinely restorative.
Exactly. Our sources for this deep dive are, well, they're a fascinating departure from our usual research papers. We're looking at a set of detailed photography notes,
From a source named Ang.
right, from Ang. And they're focused entirely on architectural observation in an urban setting. So our mission here is to sort of extract the key principles of something called biophilic design from these notes.
And to understand why one particular observation stood out to Ang so dramatically.
And what was that?
Well, that observation, which is really the centerpiece of these notes, is genuinely surprising. I mean, when you look for examples of design that integrates nature, you probably picture these shiny glass towers or fancy eco-resorts.
Big budget stuff.
Exactly. But Aang found this perfect, striking example of this design philosophy in a high-traffic, very utilitarian space.
Which
It's
was
an urban public
a
restroom.
public restroom,
Right.
a space in a city that's usually just about, stark efficiency and a complete lack of soul.
hmm
That's why this is such a great target for a deep dive. It just flips the script on what we assume is even possible in public infrastructure.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's figure out the exact elements that transformed a necessary pit stop into a place of, well, discovery.
Okay, so to start, let's establish our foundation. What are
Sure.
we even talking about? The source material defines biophilic design pretty clearly.
Go on.
It's an architectural philosophy that purposefully introduces elements of the natural world.
So things like air, light, life, natural materials, and it brings them into constructed indoor or public spaces. The intention is a really conscious effort to strengthen the human connection to nature within that built environment.
And when we talk about that connection, we usually have a certain set of expectations, right?
hmm
The notes highlight that biophilic design is. It's often associated with these large-scale projects.
Where budget is less of a concern.
Exactly. Think of these huge corporate campuses or maybe a dedicated wellness center, or, like the sources suggest, even those highly designed highway rest stops.
Right, where the goal is to give you a brief, contained moment of calm before you get back on the road.
So when you hear the term, you mentally default to, I don't know, expensive living walls that need special irrigation systems or...
Or massive skylights and high-end lobbies.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are luxury elements. What's so profound about Aang finding this application in a common urban utility is that it inherently democratizes the impact of the design.
What do you mean by that? How so?
It proves that the core ideas of biophilia aren't financially exclusive. That benefit, that sense of calm you get from being near nature, it isn't just reserved for those with the biggest budgets.
Ah,
If these principles can be applied so effectively in a basic public restroom, it means the impact is really rooted in the intention, in the thoughtful implementation, not just the sheer dollar amount spent on square footage.
so it's an idea that elevates necessity,
Exactly.
and that's our why it matters. Design excellence, when it's focused on our well-being, isn't limited by location or by budget. So let's get into the specifics. How did they do it? What was the exact recipe that Aang documented in these notes that took this space from sterile to striking?
The first, and I think most crucial component, is the non-human living elements.
Okay.
The notes specifically call out the integration of trees, or maybe large shrubs, directly into the physical space itself.
So this is not just decorative.
No, this is structural integration of life.
And that phrase, structural integration of life, that's really important. When we talk about a plant being structurally integrated, we're not talking about some potted fig tree someone bought at a hardware store.
Not at all. We're discussing a plant system that's been purposefully situated to affect the building's microclimate, the air quality, and the entire composition of the space. It's an intentional part of the architectural envelope.
So the architect actually had to account for things like water runoff, root space.
For sure. And maybe even how the foliage interacts with the air exchange system. This ensures the biophilic element isn't just an afterthought. It's a functional, permanent fixture designed to survive in a high-traffic area.
But, integrating living, breathing elements into a high-traffic space like that, it immediately raises red flags for maintenance.
That's a really sharp question.
Did Aang's notes say anything about how they managed, irrigation or just the general abuse plants take in a public area?
The sources don't detail the plumbing or the irrigation schedule, no. But the fact that this integration was so striking and functional, it suggests the designers really did address those issues. The notes focus more on the resulting effect.
Okay.
And a big part of that effect relied heavily on the second set of elements, light and air. Eng specifically noted there was ample natural light and open-air ventilation,
Where was that?
particularly behind the sink area. In a conventional public restroom, light is usually fluorescent, right? And ventilation is this mechanical humming box on the wall.
Yeah, always.
But here, those functional necessities, light and air, are treated as essential design elements that work with the plants.
So it's a system. If the greenery is structurally integrated, then the natural light and the open air become its fuel source,
Right.
which ensures the plants thrive, which in turn enhances the air quality for the people using this space.
Yeah.
It's like a closed feedback loop of well-being.
It is.
But that alone can still feel a little sparse, a bit cold.
Yeah.
What provided the grounding element, the visual and tactile warmth.
That brings us to the critical material choice that gave it that necessary warmth and anchoring texture. It was a prominent red brick wall.
Brick. Huh. In a modern urban utility space, that is a fascinating choice. Why would a designer pick red brick instead of the usual, smooth, sterile, wipe-down surfaces like tile or stainless steel?
Because that is exactly what they were trying to avoid, that feeling of something being clinical and temporary. Brick, especially a prominent red brick wall, provides this distinct texture and a rich warmth.
It stops the space from feeling disposable.
Precisely. It gives it a sense of history, of permanence that sort of invites you to slow down, even if it's just for 30 seconds. It's a tactile experience.
And the combination of that deep, man-made but still earthy warmth from the brick set against the vibrant life of the plants. That's where the aesthetic payoff happens. It's kind of like the color theory of nature.
Absolutely. The photographer focused heavily on that visual contrast. The vibrant green leaves of the foliage provided what he called a striking and refreshing contrast against the rich red and brown tones of the brick.
That contrast is the visual equivalent of taking a deep, calming breath. It's dynamic, but also really tranquil. If you think about the usual psychological state when you enter a typical urban restroom, it's transient, you're a little bit anxious, and it's focused purely on utility.
You want to get in and out.
Right. But what Eng documented here is a space where the combination of these three key factors, the integrated life, the natural light and air, and that rich, permanent texture, it all synthesizes into something totally different.
It moves from pure utility to a kind of micro-refuge. The combination transforms what is ordinarily just a functional, common public space into what the source calls a tranquil, natural view. The elements work together to completely override your expectation of the space.
And that is the ultimate learner's insight here. Biophilic design, when it's done well, doesn't just decorate a space. It fundamentally alters the entire mood and even the behavior of the person in it. It transforms a mundane necessity into a moment of discovery, which is exactly why Eng felt so compelled to document it.
And what's fascinating here is how the purposeful inclusion of elements that usually belong outside trees, rough brick, raw light, how they can redefine even the most basic public utility.
Yeah.
It tells us that high density and all the pressures of urbanization, they don't have to mean sacrificing that vital human connection to nature. It can be meticulously engineered right into the architectural fabric.
It just underscores that quote from Eng that really stood out to us. You always discover something new on your photo walk. The experience of simply walking into this restroom was reframed as a discovery because the design invited you to observe rather than demanding you avoid it.
It's a powerful testament to the idea that intentionality, rather than budget, is probably the most crucial architectural tool we have.
So to recap, we define biophilic design as the purposeful introduction of nature.
And our source material illustrated its profound, transformative impact using this very specific, very relatable example of an urban public restroom.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to carry forward as you look at the functional spaces in your own environment. Well, if a public restroom, the very definition of a transient utilitarian space, can be transformed into a tranquil, natural view just through these simple principles of purposeful light, integrated life, and grounding texture, what other overlooked functional spaces around you are just waiting for a biophilic intervention?
That's a great question. Start applying this lens of intentionality. Look for that striking green contrast against warm brick, and just consider what it takes to bring the outside in. You might be surprised what quiet discoveries you find during your own daily routine.
Until the next deep dive.
See you soon.